Number 3. Basic info about me. I'm currently a 17-year-old female who gets mistaken as a 21 to 24-year-old. I got into university early, and forgive me if I mess up on my English, it's my second language. First of all, let me start off by saying that I'm used to being stalked. I guess since I have the face of a child and the height of an adult, that attracts a lot of creepers. So I'm used to it. I've actually come up with a system on how I can check if a stalker is dangerous or not. This story took place about 4 or 5 months ago. I was a student at a university in Marbella, Spain, at the time of this incident. I'm the type of person who likes to get into class before everyone else does, to set up pranks. One day I was walking to the university early in the morning. I was listening to music when I heard the sound of a car creeping behind me. There weren't any sidewalks, causing students to walk on the side, if not the middle of the road. Thinking it was a car that wanted to get by and go to work or something, I moved aside. I pulled out my earplugs as a safety measure, and when I looked at the driver, he was almost leaning out of his window entirely, giving me this creepy-ass stare. His eyes looked like they were going to pop out of his skull. You know, the eyes of someone who does a whole lot of drugs. Being a little startled by this, I pretended to walk on as if I saw nothing, occasionally glancing back at him. I've seen him around before, and he and some of his companions would go up to girls and try to talk to them and get them inside their car. Some of the girls even caught the men trying to take pictures of them. Every time anyone passed their small shack of a home, where they all lived, it always smelled of weed. Now that I think about it, I wonder why the police never did anything about them. I finally reached the tunnel one has to cross to get to the university trail. It's a rundown road that goes up a hill, with nothing but farms around it. So convenient. Still hearing the car creep behind me and getting slower as I got closer to the tunnel, I sprinted as soon as I reached it. I got out onto the trail, and I didn't stop running until I reached the university's main building. I looked back and saw the car make a U-turn at the head of the trail and disappeared into the distance. Panting, I tried to open the building's door. Oh great, it was locked. I pulled out my phone quickly and asked my friend why it was locked at this time. Turns out, it was a holiday today, meaning I got up for no freaking reason. After collecting myself, I walked back down the trail stealthily. I glanced around everywhere. The car, nor the man was in sight. Feeling relieved, I decided to walk through the tunnel at ease. Once I was back on the road, I heard that familiar car creeping behind me again. Taking a quick glance behind my shoulder, you guessed it, it was the creeper guy. Still staring, still with half of his body sticking out of the window. Thinking quickly, I remembered that there was a small fence up ahead where one could jump over it. It would land them right in a forest with lots of cover that I knew like the back of my hand. I jogged up to the fence and leaned against it facing the road and the car. I pulled out my phone and pretended to text someone while I was actually filming the person who was following me. The man's car almost came to a halt, and then I prepared myself. I forgot to mention that I'm a blue belt in Taekwondo. The man seemed like he was about to open his door when another car came up behind him. This car seemed to be perfectly normal. In fact, the driver wasn't too happy about my stalker's car driving so slowly. More and more cars began to pile up behind Mr. Creeper, forcing him to move down the road. I watched with a smirk as his face turned into a look of anger. It was the kind of face a baby would make. I've noticed a lot of stalkers make that face when they fail. I watched him until he looked away, having to see where he was driving off to. I waited until he turned the corner, knowing that he might make a U-turn again. I sprinted back to my apartment, double-checking to see if I was being followed before I went in. I did see that guy again a couple more times. He and his buddies tried to talk to me, even tried to touch my arm as I walked away. I'll just let you imagine what I did about that. Now that I come to think of this, I realize it's a lot creepier than I originally viewed it as. Just what exactly were they up to? I'm at a different university now and it's much better, especially with security, since it's online. Number 2. My mom is a straight-up type of person and always tells the truth even if she's in the wrong. This is her story and is told from her point of view as it was told to me. I was about 15 years old back in the early 1980s, and one night I was home alone. I was grounded this weekend, and my brother, who was 18, and my mother were gone all night because of their computer schooling. I was on the phone with one of my friends when all of a sudden my motion sensor lights come on, and when they turn on, they light up the whole backyard, and I swear I saw the shadow of a person. My room is at the very end of the hallway. I have a door that leads to the backyard. The door hinges are on the outside, which makes it even more creepy. So I'm in the kitchen talking with my friend. Out of nowhere, I hear the noises coming from the backyard. Now I'm a scared 15-year-old girl, late at night, home alone. The kitchen phone has a really long cord that could reach all the way to the hallway. I tell my friend I think someone's trying to break in. My friend sends his cousin over to come get me on his bike, so I hang up the phone, then realize I need to get my purse out of my room. And where the noises were coming from were at the back of the house, where my room was. I start walking back there, and it sounds like someone has a hammer or a crowbar smashing it against my back door. I bolt out of the front door and start running up the street to meet with my friend's cousin. After a while, I call my mom, and she's home and pissed off, screaming, "You're grounded. Why aren't you here?" I tell my mom what happened, and of course she doesn't believe me. The next morning, my mom goes and looks around back to see if I was actually telling the truth. My mom starts freaking out and yelling, "You can't sleep in your room anymore." Someone had tried prying my door hinges off to get into the house. They most likely knew that I was home alone because they probably found some place in the backyard where they could see that I was in the kitchen, and also must have noticed that all the cars were gone. Seeing that I was a 15-year-old girl, they seized the opportunity to try to break in. I'm guessing that this must have been their first time, seeing how they set off the motion sensor lights and made their presence obvious with all the racket they made trying to enter the house. The would-be intruder probably heard me leave the house and lost his nerve and decided to book it. After that, I had to sleep in my mom's room for a while, and we had the back door that was in my room blocked so no one could access it. This may not sound too extreme, but that was one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me, and I have to wonder what exactly they would have done if they had managed to break in. Number 1. This story begins in the summer of 2008, at which time I was 13. I'll elaborate a bit more, however. I am female, and at the time I was living in Surrey, British Columbia, which is a very crime-ridden city. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's the most dangerous city in Canada. Surrey is where people who can't afford to live in Vancouver end up residing. At the time, my parents worked a lot. My mom had 2 jobs, one at a crisis hotline and the other at a women's transition house. And my dad was always away on business trips because he worked for the government. Having said all this, my parents weren't able to drive me places, so naturally I would walk or use public transportation if I had money, which was not very often. It was a hot August day, and early in the afternoon, I had called my friend Katie, asking if I could come over to pick up some clothes I had forgotten over there during the summer, because school was starting soon, and I was going to need them. She said sure, but wasn't going to be there long, because she had plans to hang out with this guy she liked at the time, I exclaimed that was fine, and I would be over there in about an hour. I said an hour because of how long it would take me to walk over there. I didn't have any money, so I couldn't take the bus. I left the house, and from what I can remember, I was wearing jean shorts, high-top Converse, and I think just a pink zip-up hoodie. I walked about 30 minutes to Surrey Central Mall and got on the SkyTrain, which I clearly didn't pay to get on, and no one at the time really did because security rarely checked tickets. I only had to go one stop over from where I was, but the ride would shave off 10 minutes of my journey. So I got to her place and she let me use a T&A duffel bag to pack all my clothes in. I left promptly afterwards, and as I stepped outside, I thought about how I should go about my journey back home. And then I thought, well, if I go up a few blocks to the right and then take a left, I can follow that street all the way down to where my street is. It was pretty much a straight shot to my house, and although it would take an hour, it was the least complicated route, and it was also a really nice day out. So I decided on this and started walking. I'm about 10 minutes or so into my walk, and I'm on the street that will eventually take me to my road. The street I'm on is kind of busy, nothing crazy, but cars are passing by every other minute or so. I'm used to creeps staring and guys honking at me. It just comes with living in a sleazy-ass city. So when a silver Kia, I want to say, drives past with a middle-aged balding man in it, staring intensely at me, I just brush it off and keep on walking, listening to my music on my pink MP3 player. A few minutes pass and I get a strange feeling. So I look up, and that's when I barely noticed it. The balding creep was driving past me again, staring me up and down. I start to get a little creeped out, but not too majorly at that point, so I just keep walking. I'm coming up beside a high school parking lot, and I'm just zoning out. But then, I'm getting this tingly feeling through my arms, which I now know as my creep sense, and boy, were they tingling at the time. So I just casually glance over into the high school parking lot, and you guessed it, balding creep was sitting in his car, facing me. I quickly averted my gaze and kept walking, hoping that if I just ignored him, maybe he would just get bored and leave me alone. A few meters after I came to a stoplight, I pressed the button, and as I'm waiting for the little white man and beeping to happen, I notice the silver Kia drive past, and I breathe a sigh of relief, but only for a moment, because he pulls into the parking lot of the convenience store across the street and now has his car idling a few feet from the sidewalk. It's my turn to cross the street, and at this point, I'm getting pretty bad anxiety. He is 100%, without a doubt, following me, and he obviously doesn't have good intentions. After I pass his car, I hear him drive out onto the street and see him pass me. He wasn't letting up, because about 2 blocks up, I see him turn into a side street that I'll soon have to pass, and as I got closer, I see him idling there, with his car just before the sidewalk, facing me, as if to pretend he was going to turn back onto the main road. So I'm freaking out internally, and as I pass him for the millionth goddamn time, I start trying to figure out what the hell I'm gonna do. As my heart starts pounding faster and my breathing becomes heavier, I still have a really long way to go, and even if I do make it to my street, I either have the option of going through a really creepy alleyway and a few minutes down a quiet street to my house, this being the shortest route, or I can walk past this shortcut and spend about 10 minutes going around and walking through a bunch of quiet streets to my house. So basically, no matter what I decide, I'll be putting myself in the perfect position to get kidnapped, or God knows what, by this fucking pedo creep. As all this is going through my head, I see a small Asian woman in front of me, and we are gonna pass each other. I contemplate on asking her for help, but I don't want to look like a weirdo and most likely freak her out. So we pass and I start to cry a bit, feeling helpless and scared. I start to freak out even more as I see 2 blocks up, the silver car is waiting for me, but this time he's parked beside the sidewalk and standing outside and leaning against his car, staring and waiting for me. I don't want to find out what he's planning on doing, so I'm thinking of what I'm gonna do as I'm getting closer, when all of a sudden I see a bus coming to a stop up ahead and a person exiting. Right then and there, I decided that I'm getting on that bus. I don't care where it's going, I'm getting on it. So I started running up and I jump on. Out of breath, I explain to the driver that I don't have any money, but there's a man following me. And he nods, and the bus starts moving. As I'm holding on to the safety bars and try to breathe a bit and process what the hell is going on, a woman, probably 18 to 20 years old, comes up to me and asked me what was going on. I explain in a shaky voice everything that happened, and I find out that the bus is basically going in the opposite direction of my house, and I start freaking out again. The woman then says that she can walk with me a bit of the way home, as she's on her way to work in the area that I need to go towards. So I calm myself and I exit the bus, warily looking around, expecting to see that car, assuming that he had followed the bus, but he wasn't anywhere in sight. I start to breathe normally again. She walks with me part way, and eventually I make it home without any further incident. I told my sister what happened, but she didn't believe me and said I was just being paranoid, so I didn't tell anyone else about the incident after that. So basically that's my story about being stalked and coming pretty damn close to potentially getting kidnapped by some creepy pedo. After this happened to me, I never felt comfortable being out in public alone wearing shorts, skirts, or basically anything that showed skin. And I'm not kidding, you'll always see me wearing pants and a sweater. I just really don't want to attract any negative attention or any creepy people ever again. So from my story, please take away some advice. First, always be aware of your surroundings. If I wasn't, I wouldn't have noticed that guy, and probably wouldn't be here today. Second, always have a plan if you find yourself in a sketchy situation. And of course, lastly, don't ever consider living in Surrey. Hey guys, Unit 522 here, and I want to thank you very much for watching my video. I would appreciate it very much if you would share, like, and comment. And if you're new to this channel, become one with the Unity by hitting the subscribe button. If you have a scary story or experience that you want featured on this channel, you can always send it to my email or post it on the Free Horror Stories subreddit. The links for those can be found in the description below. If you would like to help out this channel even more, consider a PayPal donation. And for more updates, be sure to follow me on Twitter. There's nothing wrong with a little darkness in your life, as long as you never forget, there's always a reason to be afraid.